Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot, Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host my first webinar of the year. It's on uranium today. We're going to hear from Azincourt Energy Management, including Alex Klenman. He's the CEO, and Trevor Perkins. He's the VP Exploration of the company. Now, during today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take some questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. But before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this Azincourt webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of Azincourt's corporate presentation. That can be found on the company's website, azincourtenergy.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the particular situation or need of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Azincourt Energy. With that, guys, I want to turn it over to Alex to update our audience on the company.
Great. Thanks so much, David. And thank you for those in attendance today. I'm going to assume several people are familiar with Azincourt, but if this is your first time, bear with us as we go through some of the slides. We're going to brush over sort of sector-related stuff and you know, the mission statement and all that. And in any case, Azincourt Energy is an exploration company. We're based in the Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan, and we trade on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol AAZ, on the OTCQB under the symbol AZURF or AZURF for our US friends. There's your standard disclaimer. I'm sure you've all read these before. The most important thing to take out of this is all the technical information that you will see and hear today has been reviewed and approved by Trevor, who's our QP. Again, we just wanted to brush over some of this stuff. We know many people in this industry know, and others now, it's come to light over the last couple of years, the supply demand deficits that are in the uranium space, the core material. We need new mines coming online. And the first step in finding new mines is exploration companies doing the digging to find potential deposits. That's us. I am the CEO and president of Azincourt. I came on board in 2017, and we've pushed through in my time. We've raised considerable funds, and we've been able to earn majority interest in our primary project, which is the East Preston project, a joint venture with Sky Harbor Resources. Trevor came on a couple of years ago now as our VP Exploration. We wanted somebody who had made in their career uranium discoveries, and he has done so. He knows, he's our technical guru, if you will. He is directing all of the exploration efforts, and we're happy to have him. And the rest of our management team, Ted and Paul, are directors, both geologists, and Vivian, our CFO. They all do great jobs and contribute immensely to what we do. Again, industry overview. It's all about supply and demand. That's what we do when you're looking for materials. And if there are projected deficits, then you're in the right space. And we know after about a 10-year bear market in the uranium sector that things were going to change. Long-term contracts would need to be secured. A lot of them were particularly in the U.S. were expiring or set to expire. And we knew at that point that we would see a jump in the spot price. We did in 21. 22 was a little unanticipated. We saw a lot of broad market issues and sell-offs and corrections, and the uranium sector unfortunately wasn't able to avoid being dragged down into that. But it's percolating, and we know where we are, and we're somewhat stable, and we're waiting for that next leg up. We have several projects. The most important one to key on, and which we'll speak mainly to today, is the East Preston project. It's a 25,000 hectare exploration project in the southwestern side of the Athabasca Basin on the edge there. We've put a lot of money into this project and generated a lot of targets. It is a very target-rich project, over 30 kilometers of conductive trends to drill into, and of which we just really started in earnest last year, and we'll speak to that momentarily. Our second project of note is Hatchet Lake in the northeastern side of the basin. We tried to get drills in the ground earlier in the latter half of 2022. Unfortunately, the consultation process is fairly slow, and we're working towards getting all of that settled and underway so we can drill Hatchet Lake. And we have a small portfolio of projects in Peru, which probably won't be there the next time you see this deck, but we'll see where that goes as well. Where we are, obviously, in the Athabasca Basin is ground zero for high grade, large deposits. Probably the best place on the planet when you consider A, history, and B, stable political environment. That's what we get there. There's lots of infrastructure, and we know that there's a lot of deposits yet to be found. Most of the work has been centralized in specific areas of the basin, and over the last decade, that's expanded to include the perimeter of the basin where we find ourselves. There's reasons for that, and we'll get into that momentarily. This is an updated slide on the neighborhood market caps. You can see Azincourt in the red there. Obviously, we occupy a good land position. We're bordered on the west by Orano and on the north by NextGen. These are both billion-dollar market caps, which is a nice place to be for a junior like ourselves. But there's been a lot of discovery in the neighborhood, particularly recently, Fishing 3.0 with a really nice hole. And we're in a good spot. We think there's a lot to be found here, and again, we're working towards that. The East Preston project, as mentioned, is part of a larger, almost 75,000 hectare project called Preston. That is a Sky Harbor venture, and we're happy to have the eastern section. We now own close to 75%. I think, Trevor, you can correct me here, but we'll be closer to 80% when this upcoming drill program is completed. Yes. So we control the majority interest, and we have a great partner in Sky Harbor who is an active partner. And I'm going to let Trevor direct the technical slides now as he gets into the nitty gritty of East Preston, what we've seen, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. So go ahead, Trevor.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So the East Preston project, we've been working it extensively for the last several years now. The first phase of our work, of course, was conducting airborne surveys over the property, which the picture on this slide sort of illustrates. We identified major conductive trends through the central portion of the property, the main trends being our AG trend in this area and our KHQ trend, as you can see shown there. Those are our dominant trends on the property. And of course, we focus in on these conductive trends because uranium deposits, especially in the Athabasca Basin, seem to be associated with basement conductive rock packages. So you want to focus in on those as your first indicator of the areas you want to be in. But as you can also see on this slide, we've got to the west of the two trends I highlighted, we've got a lot of short parallel trends which have to be tested at some point. And then to the east, you've got some more focused, sort of what we call like a bullseye trend that we'll need to test at some point in the future as well. So as Alex said, there's no shortage of targets available on this property. Moving to the next slide here. So once we did the airborne surveys, we go in on the ground to sort of focus in where on these trends exactly we want to be, where exactly the conductor occurs within the rock package identified in the airborne survey. So I like to think of it as the airborne survey gets you in the ballpark, and then the ground survey sort of gets you on base, so to speak. So we ran two ground-based surveys. We ran a gravity survey, which is the colored background you see on these grids that were put in on the ground. And then we ran a horizontal loop EM survey, which is the survey to actually identify where the conductor is. And The conductor is shown as the black squiggly lines through the colored background areas. So the EM survey shows you where the conductor is. The gravity survey shows you where broken up rock is, whether that be because of alteration or structure. So it shows you where the rock is weak. So what you like to see is weak rock with a graphitic conductor. Shows you've got the rocks you need, plus you've got the ground preparation to allow fluids to move through the system. So looking at the East Preston project and a little bit closer to where we drilled on the A, B, and G zones. So prior to this last program we ran in 2022, we had completed 24 holes, which had mostly focused on the A through the north end of the G zone. These holes showed us that we had elevated uranium, favorable basement lithologies, and good graphitic structures and graphitic lithologies within the structural package. And we have interpreted this area to be very analogous to what is seen in the Patterson Lake South and the Arrow and the Hook Lake trend. So along that trend, we're seeing very similar structural scenarios, lithologies, which are all good signs of, we want to be here looking. Trace element geochemistry from these drill holes that were completed prior to last year showed us we have anomalous pathfinder minerals, which are typically your base metals that are typically in the fluids moving around with the uranium. So we're seeing anomalous pathfinders, nickel, cobalt, copper, zinc, arsenic. So we know the right fluids are flowing through the area, as well as seeing elevated uranium in some of the holes. So we have the right fluids. We have the structure. We have the lithologies. So we very much believe we're seeing what we want to see. Moving into our program we completed last winter, which was our largest program to date on the property, we focused on our G, K, and H zones for our drilling last year. We completed 19 holes for approximately 5,000 meters of drilling, and we identified 3 zones of alteration on the south end of the G zone, within the K zone, and within the H zone, totaling approximately 1,700 meters of strike length between the 3 zones. Focusing in on the G zone, most of our attention where we were seeing the alteration and best results was on the south end of the G zone, where we hit fairly extensive hydrothermal hematite alteration and evidence for a steep east-west trending cross-cutting structure coming through the area. So our normal structural trend trends across the map in a northeasterly direction, sort of like that. Now what we want to see, which we're seeing in the south end, is we want to see an east-west structure cross-cutting that. Where those structures intersect is sort of the area, one of the areas you would want to focus in on. So we're seeing evidence of that east-west structure. We're seeing good hydrothermal alteration. And not only that, we started to see some elevated uranium and thorium in those holes as well. It's telling us, we're where we want to be. We're definitely seeing signs that show us we are very close to something.
Trevor, can you elaborate a little bit on the uranium-thorium ratios?
Oh, yes, certainly. Yeah, so normally in the type of rocks we're seeing, you would see a uranium-thorium ratio of approximately 0.2 to 0.3, which means you're seeing approximately 5 times the amount of thorium as compared to uranium. Now, what happens when we're seeing higher than that values means we're seeing more uranium than thorium. When you get above 1, your uranium is significantly higher than your amount of thorium, so therefore you're enriched in uranium. So that's the type of thing, that's one of the types of clues you want to see to know, hey, I'm starting to see a lot more uranium flowing around in the system. So yeah, so like I said here in the slide, in hole EP37, we have a uranium thorium ratio of 1.5, which would normally be 0.2, 0.3. Good indications there's a lot of extra uranium flowing around.
A very good sign.
So moving on to the next zone, we're looking at zone K. So after we completed our holes in Zone G, we started drilling in Zone K. Right off the bat, very first hole in the Zone K area, extensive hydrothermal alteration. We ended up actually losing that hole because of the amount of alteration and structure in the holes, in the ground. So very good signs. It's, you know, we like to say it's hard on the drillers, but when it's hard on the drillers, it's good for us because we're seeing the broken up ground, the faulting we want to see. But unfortunately, that also means that sometimes you can't complete the holes if the ground conditions are just too bad. So the alteration zone we intersected in the K zone ended up being at least 1,200 meters long because we have not closed it off to the north or south yet. And the appearances may be that it is bending around into our B zone at the north end as well. So we may be seeing something bending around in here. Also, we have not closed it off to the south. So we'd have no idea how far that alteration zone will extend down. What is interesting that in the middle of that zone, we intersected elevated radioactivity in excess of 10 times our background values. We also had a uranium-thorium ratio of 1.2 up in this area. Again, showing that we've got a lot of extra uranium flowing around in the system.
Trevor, at this point, maybe it's a good idea to briefly discuss the significance of the alteration, the hematite and the clay, and why we place so much emphasis. I'm sure if anybody's been through any number of our interviews, they see that we always speak to alteration, and there's a reason for that. So why don't you get into that for a little bit, please?
Yes, of course. The alteration is very important when you're looking for uranium deposits. Uranium deposits all seem to have a uranium halo or an alteration halo associated with them. And typically this is a zoned halo, sort of like a bullseye. You'll start with sort of hydrothermal hematite around the outside. As you get in closer, you're going to start to see more clays coming in, more extensive white clays you like to see. And then as you get in closer, then you'll start to see the uranium mineralization itself starting to show up. So it's like a big bullseye. You want to hit the rings of the bullseye, work your way towards the middle. So we're seeing fairly extensive rings on our bullseye now. It's starting to focus us into the areas you want to be. All of the major deposits, let me rephrase that. Most of the major deposits in the basin have been found by first identifying this alteration halo and then chasing it to the deposit. There are a couple of notable examples where the first or second hole got lucky and got right into the mineralization instead of finding the alteration first. But these are typically the exception rather than the rule.
Thank you.
So moving on to the K zone, or the H zone, sorry, we just did the K zone. So this particular trend in the K zone, it's covering a bend in the conductors, and bends in the conductors are good because, as a normal rule, the conductors themselves won't bend. What happens is they break up, and the appearance is of a bend, but it's actually a lot of small faulted segments, whereas the rock bends around the orientation of the structure. So we end up with we've got something potentially coming down and sort of bending around. H zone is covering that bend. And we are seeing a lot of short strike length conductors in there with very high potential for something to be sitting between or on these short structural breaks. Extensive hydrothermal alteration in here as well. We're seeing hydrothermal hematite, some white clays coming in. We're seeing a very thick package in excess of 200 meters thick in these drill holes. So it's very strong alteration we're seeing. We are thinking this zone may be continuous with K zone, but as yet there is a 2-kilometer gap between drilling in the middle here, which we're not sure if things connect up or not. One of the goals of upcoming programs will be to put a few holes in there, see if the alteration continues, or if it stops, there may be a way it may be telling us to focus more in the specific zones within our drilling we're already seeing. So it's worth knowing how extensive this zone actually is. I like to think of it, we're not necessarily going to see a huge deposit in here. We may see a string of slightly smaller deposits along this trend as we go. So we'll have to test all along it, make sure we're not missing anything. And in zone H as well, we ended up seeing one hole returning a 12 ppm uranium with a 0.5 uranium thorium ratio. So not as high as we were seeing in the other zones, but the alteration zone is quite a bit thicker. So it may be that we just haven't focused in on the richer parts of the zone yet. So moving on to what we have planned for our 2023 program. So we've identified our 5 main zones of focus on the property so far. As we alluded to earlier, still lots of targets, but these are the 5 we're focusing on first. We've got hydrothermal alteration in our G zone, in our K zone, in our H zone. We have evidence that suggests that the K zone alteration may be extending up into the B zone. We also have evidence to suggest that the K and H zones may be connected. We have as yet not put any drill holes on the Q zone. The geophysics indicates this is a highly prospective zone. So one of our goals is to get some holes down there and let us know if that's an area we need to focus in as well. The elevated rate uranium we have intersected so far is clear evidence that we've got uranium-bearing fluids moving through our alteration systems. What we need to do now is focus in within those alteration systems to find out exactly where the uranium rich fluids are pooling and where the uranium is dropping out of fluids and forming a deposit. So mobilization is currently underway for our winter program. The road has been completed the camp should be moving in as we speak and being built. It's slightly slower than anticipated. We had some warm weather over the last 2 weeks, which slowed road building down a little bit, but we're still full steam ahead. Ideally, drills will be turning later this month.
Perfect. Trevor, thanks so much. Yeah, we're excited. But before we leave East Preston here, I'll just throw in that, it's taken a long time to get here. It's taken a lot of years and a lot of capital and a lot of patience. But that's the nature of the game. Exploration, grassroots exploration in this case. I should say not a lot of grassroots exploration gets to this point. I mean, many projects are killed well short of where we are. But we keep getting positive results. Everything that we do continues to push the story forward in a positive way. So we're hunting, and it's been bearing fruit. I know for some people it doesn't happen fast enough. You could probably find me among those people. But as we move along, we know we're getting closer. We're doing the right things. All the evidence is suggesting that we should continue because we're in the right area. And so we're excited. 2023 program will hopefully paint a bigger picture for us. There's a lot of goals in this program. Obviously, we'd like to see more clay. We'd like to improve the mineralization, see some numbers that are higher, and again, continue to push this forward. Of course, we'd accept a big hole, like our neighbors at Fission 3.0. So be good for that. But look, this is a game that we know, and we're being methodical and strategic and smart about where we put the drills and allocate the dollars. So looking forward to the winter program coming up. We'll speak briefly to Hatchet Lake. Again, I mentioned off the top that we wanted to drill Hatchet in the fall. That was our plan. One of the things that we didn't necessarily anticipate was community involvement, community consultation starting from scratch, because up in the area there wasn't much, there hadn't been much work done in several years. So basically all the relationships were new. We were the new company coming in. But that process is underway, and we're hopeful that we can get something done. We know Standard Uranium, for example, has reached an agreement with the locals up there, and that benefits us as we know how to navigate moving forward. So I don't know if we really want to go through all the technical stuff here. But Trevor, if you want to just do a really brief rip through the 2 or 3 slides here very briefly, just to give people who may not be familiar with Hatchet what it is we're after here. So maybe go ahead.
Okay, I can do a very brief overview of Hatchet here for a few minutes. So Hatchet Lake is located on the eastern side of the Athabasca Basin, actually up in the northeast corner, just outside the basin margin. What is significant about this is once the major deposits were found within the basin, just outside of the basin on the edges was relatively ignored for many years, and only really started to see attention again in the last 10 to 15 years once basement hosted deposits started to be properly identified and gain a lot more attention. And then, of course, once some discoveries started to be made on the west side, attention outside of the basin just increased significantly. So as you can see on this map, the Hatchet Lake property, it's located within a fairly extensive structural corridor that hosts all of the major deposits and producing mines on the east side of the basin. So it's a fairly significant corridor that extends all the way up through the basin. So looking at it a little closer, you can see it's a long strike from the Rough Rider deposit, which is in this, the Rough Rider deposit in this area. We've got the recent hurricane deposit discoveries over in this area. You can see we're a long strike, and within that trend of major deposits, you've got McLean Lake, you've got Eagle Point. I mean, all these deposits in the area look good for more deposits being found as we move outside of the basin. Several areas have been identified on the property, and most of these have been identified because of ground sampling, going in, walking around, looking for boulders, doing some geophysics to identify where the conductive packages are. And boulders on the surface have returned as much as 2.4% uranium. So, it's very good signs that there is a deposit somewhere in the area, and we're fairly confident that it is on the property based on glacial till directions and where the up ice indicators point of where the source for the boulders may be. So we're very excited to keep pursuing efforts to get on the ground here, and are hopeful that this will be sooner rather than later as we move through the consultation process with the local communities and build these relationships.
Well said. Okay, great. We'll jump to last couple slides, and then we'll take some questions. I can see a few of them are already there. We have 227 million shares out, which seems like a lot for some people, but in the uranium space, if you're a uranium company that's been around as we have for almost a decade, primarily our first 7-8 years of existence was financing at depressed share prices with nobody taking much interest and taking dollars where you can. But the goal at the time was to complete the earn-in agreement with our JV partner. To do that prior to the sector waking up, we were hopeful that could be the case, and that turned out to be the case. Our timing was pretty good. We have cash on hand in about 10 million, which is amazing for a pre-discovery drill company. I think it speaks to how we're approaching our exploration at East Preston. It speaks to confidence in the company, and it speaks to confidence in the project. So, when I came into Azincourt in 2017, you couldn't utter the word uranium without having the door slammed in your face before you finished the word itself. So for us to get from there, where we strung together what we could. We pieced it together any way we could. To go from there to be as well funded and well supported as we are is quite a turnaround, and one that I would not have envisioned back in 2017 or 18 or even 2019. So we're thankful to our supporters and our investors for allowing us to do this in a strong way. We're focused, and we're able to drill. Major shareholders, institutionally speaking, we have 30% of the company or so is held by institutional funds. There's small funds, there's large funds, there's actually 28 different funds. But again, a family office and a giant fund like MMCap, for example, are different entities, but they are all institutional buyers. So we have about 25, 26, 27, as many as 28 funds in the deal. Insiders, close associate, family, and friends, we're in that 15 to 20% range. Hard for me to really track everybody's positions, but we're committed, we're invested, and we're here for the long haul. So that's it. Dave, if you're listening, if you want to pop back on, we can address some of the questions I see that have popped up on the screen.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much, Alex. Trevor, great presentation there. I have lost count the number of doors that have slammed in my face over the last 16 years covering uranium.
Yeah, listen, it was bleak. And I had more than one person very close to the company in 2018, 2019 saying, maybe we ought to just move into something else. And I kind of held firm because I felt, having gone through 2011 and 12, that if we can just make it through the tunnel here, the dark tunnel, it was a gamble, but I'm thankful that we made it.
Yeah, I do think things have changed here. So I guess let's just remind people we are in the Q&A portion of the webinar. You can type your questions into the chat box. We'll get to as many as we can. You did start off your presentation talking about uranium pricing. We are back up over $50 a pound. Do you find that you ebb and flow with uranium price as far as performance of the stock, despite the fact that you're an early explorer?
Yeah, no, listen, back, if anybody was really watching the sector in the late summer, fall of 21, you all of a sudden wake up and you see, in our case, there'd be 3 million on the bid, and then the stock price would move a penny or penny and a half or 2 pennies over a course. And it wasn't on news. It was entirely based on sentiment, which came roaring back when spot popped. And there was a lot of interest in the sector because of Sprott's attempt to get on the NASDAQ with Spud and all that. So, we benefited from that. Everybody in the sector benefited from that. So to answer your question, yeah, I see a lot of algorithms, day traders and traders coming in and out of the stock based on the macro picture. You see the price back off, it's usually a red day. And what you do is you see the majority, it's changing a little bit, but the majority over the last 6 to 12 months, everybody was red on the same day and everybody was green on the same day, right? Everybody's seen that, but I'm beginning to see a little disconnect there now too. So you're starting to see a little bit more organic movement, and again, but yeah, to answer your question, 100% tied to the performance of spot and sentiment, which is the biggest, most important factor in this business.
Yeah. So now your East Preston project, that's your flagship. A lot of companies that are getting out into the bush as quickly as possible this year. And Azincourt really only drills in the winter. So when are you going to announce that your 5,000 or 6,000 meter drill program has begun? And how many rigs do you plan to use this year?
Yeah, well, Trevor can answer this, but I think I have the answer. We hope to get the drills going here over the next couple of weeks. We'll have 2 drill rigs. As per last year, and they'll go full time into March, April, whenever spring decides it's going to come knocking. To caution everybody, spring has come early. I think 2 out of the last 3 years, that seems to be the trend we're in. So we got a tight window, and we're going to go as fast as we can. Trevor, am I on target there?
You are on target there. I mean, we're getting it. One of the things that slows us down is it is a 70-kilometer winter road we have to put in with a couple of fairly significant river crossings. So, it takes time to freeze those river crossings to a significant thickness that we can then reinforce it and get our equipment across. So all these things slow down and slow us down and tighten up our window even more.
Yeah, so it's really just a location issue, right? It's a wet area, and you need to make sure everything is frozen for when you.
Yeah, and we don't have total control over the weather. I think everybody knows that. But the other side of it is also it's working in partnership with the local community, and so CRDN is the community we work with, and we have to respect and work with them in terms of what they want to see in this area. So they're not super favorable to summer work. That's when that ground is used for hunting and fishing and recreation, and the last thing they want to do is contend with rigs and things like that. That isn't to say we can't get summer work done, particularly upon discovery. But in the early days here, why we're working in winter only is A, weather related, and B, also just respecting local communities' wishes.
Yeah, how does the weather look so far this year? I think a couple of years ago it was short winter. What's it look like this year? Obviously, a lot of snow and warm weather doesn't help creating ice.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Well,
You're closer there.
We had a really good December in terms of it was cold, and there was snow on the ground, but not an excessive amount of snow. Where the issue, so we got a good start to everything. Where the issues come in is they started to get some cold weather in the last week and a half, which is when we were dealing with one of our bigger river crossings. So that slowed down the freezing and building of ice of the river crossing. So, it's one of those things you can't predict. But I mean, overall, it has been a fairly good winter so far, other than the last week and a half. Now, a slight thaw in early January, not unusual. We usually get extensive cold weather later in January when we're in the minus 40s and minus 50s. So at this point, I'm not overly worried that there will be any adverse impacts to the start of the program, but we always do have to watch come mid to late March. Keep an eye on, in particular, our big river crossing. As soon as we start to see any significant thinning or breaking up there, we have to start pulling our equipment out before that river crossing goes. Otherwise, stuff is stranded in there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, minus 50. That's when the ice on your face is warmer than the air.
That's right. That is right.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So your two main trends, they're north-south conductive trends. Are these typical orientations of the Western Athabasca? You look at Fission and NextGen next door, they look to be running east-west, although they might have some north-south influencing mineralization, structures influencing mineralization. I guess Shade Creek is north-south. What do you think on your project?
Shea Creek, you're right, is a bit north-south, but the overall regional trends are in a northeasterly trending direction, which is what the overall trend at the Fission and NextGen deposits is in a northeasterly direction. Our overall trend is in a northeasterly direction. What you do tend to see, though, is locally you will see bends in that trend where for short segments of a few kilometers, it'll be more north-south, like we see in our K&H zone, like you see at Shea Creek. Those are more localized, shorter length bends in the overall northeast trend.
Right. Okay. And now these three alteration zones you talked about, G, H, and K, you mentioned them in the presentation, 1,700 meters worth of extent. I'm assuming those are going to be what you're following up first. Are you starting to see the right ground prep, the graphite structures, pathfinders there?
Yes, we are. I mean, everything we want to see is there. We're ticking off all the right boxes on the checklist of things you like to see. Now, I mean, every deposit is unique, and there's going to be some things that may not show up, but the deposit will still show up there. But as a general rule, there's certain things you like to see and you need to see to know you're in the right neighborhood. And we are checking off all those boxes in the three zones we have highlighted so far.
Okay. And you mentioned you'd like to fill in some gaps between those alteration zones as well. And I think that could be significant. What's the different distance between the north end of the B zone and the south end of the Q zone?
So that whole trend from the top of the B zone down to the bottom of the Q zone extends approximately 11 kilometers. And as I mentioned, the gap in drilling between the H and the K zones is approximately 2 kilometers, and we do plan on trying to fill that gap in a little bit this winter as well. And as was mentioned, we will have 2 drills on the program. The idea being that one we'll be testing some of these gaps and extending the zones, whereas the other drill will be taking where we're already seeing our elevated uranium and good alteration and trying to chase it to where it's strengthening. So we sort of have a 2-phase approach happening here with 2 drills.
Right. Okay. And how do you prioritize where you wish to drill? Considering you have 30 kilometers of these conductive trends.
Yeah, lots of discussion, and obviously it's going to be where the best data is, and where we're seeing the checklist that Trevor refers to with really bold, thick checks on those boxes. That's the easiest way to say it. And again, we are aware now, thanks to the last couple of years, where the first zones meet that criteria. There could be many other zones on the project ground that also meet that criteria. We just haven't gone there yet. But we're happy where we are, and we know that we've got extensive ground to dig into.
Okay. And your average hole depth from last year seems to be about 250 meters. Do you have an idea about how shallow potential uranium mineralization might be?
Well, just before you answer that, Trevor, let me throw something out there. One of the things I learned last year was Trevor's not going to stop a drill hole in the alteration. So when we, and to be running into 200-meter thick intervals of this alteration was totally unexpected. So some of these holes went down, over 300 meters because he wasn't going to pull a hole until he got through the other end of that alteration. But Trevor, I just wanted to mention I guess the significance of the thickness of some of those zones, because 200 meters, that's thick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we've selected our targets for drilling, we generally try to hit the target at approximately 100 meters down, and that's where we want to hit our conductive target. And once we get into the alteration, we'll keep the hole going. If we've got good structure and graphite, we get through that. If we've also got alteration, we push even further to get through that. One of the golden rules that I like to preach, especially to the geologists I'm training and stuff, is you do not stop a hole in structure. You do not stop a hole in alteration. And if that means you drill deeper, you drill deeper, because you'll, like I said, geologists I'm training, I've said to them, you'll never get in trouble for pushing a hole through structure and alteration. Even if you go 100 meters beyond planned depth, I'd rather do that than have to go set up on the same hole later to deepen it because you pulled off too soon.
Okay. Now, do you have much sandstone cover above the basement rocks?
None at all. None at all.
Okay.
We just have glacial till sitting on top of it, and then we're right into the basement rocks because we're outside the margin of the Athabasca Basin.
Exactly. So that leads to opportunity that you can find radioactive boulder fields, and obviously led to discoveries like fissions, RRR plus elsewhere. Is there opportunity to fly radiometric surveys and search for those boulder fields, or really we just well beyond that stage with?
We have flown radiometric surveys over the whole property. Some of the targets that have been selected also have coincident radiometric anomalies with them, and we have been chasing boulders as well. That is one of the reasons we're keen to get down into the Q zone as well, because there's interesting radiometric anomalies there as well. And those helped us figure out where we started with our drilling on these trends as well. So, it's one of the tools we use, one of the geophysical tools we use is radiometrics, gravity, EM, and where they all group together, where the anomalies all stack, just makes that target an even higher priority to test.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you keep adding to your project interest at East Preston. How much of the project do you own now, and what do you foresee a few years from now, assuming that only one of your partners are really diluting out?
Yeah, we're taking out the silent partner, if you will. That's we're taking their would have been 15%. So we're closer to 80% now when this drill program is done. I can envision an 80-20 with Sky Harbor or an 85-15. So we're almost there as we speak. But we'll see how that pans out. I know Jordan has some interest in sticking around, and obviously he's a solid partner and they're active. So we get along great and happy they're involved.
Yeah, a lot of communication with them as a partner.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple questions I see over there. Somebody's asking about the price per meter. Where are we at with that, Trevor, this year? Did anything change?
We're still sitting, when it's all said and done, we average in the $700 to $800 a meter rate, and that's all costs included. So I mean, prices are increasing. I expect that to increase this year and next year, but we're trying to keep that as low as we can, of course.
Inflation,
Yeah.
Yes, and everybody wants more money.
Yeah. So you're jumping ahead of me a couple questions here. Then why don't we address this? How much cash do you have, and what is your budget for the winter program, considering it's costing you this much?
Yeah, we've got about 10 million in the bank, give or take, and we have about a $4 to $5 million program here, of which I think Sky Harbor picks up a portion. With Sky Harbor's incoming cash, we'll come out of this in that probably in that 6 million range, 6.5. We'll see where we get to. We're fine for funds. One of the questions I know someone's asking is are we well funded, and is there a need to refinance or finance again? When you're an explorer, you walk a very tight line, and that is when there's capital available, you generally take it. We had some money on the table last fall. We chose to leave it. I didn't want to, after the 2.5 to 1 we did last year. I just thought maybe let's see how 2023 progressed, and if the share price can improve and then the market cap improve, and then maybe we take some more money. But I want to caution people that we're not in the business of saying no. If the funds are interested in re-upping, they're the lifeblood that gives us the opportunity to not only drill discovery, but continue to develop that discovery. And we need to balance those relationships. Right now, there's nothing imminent. Hopefully the share price can improve over the next 2 to 3 months through the drill program, and we'll see where we are and where the funds are. But it's a never hard yes or a hard no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And assuming you get to work later this month, when should we expect news? And I guess the question was actually worded solid positive news.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I can tell people when there's solid positive news, I think we'd all be sitting on a beach in the Bahamas. So it's not that simple. We can expect our news, April, May, June, depending on how the labs are always busy. We know that every year that we expect by a certain date, and then the labs are busy, and that's probably not going to change much this year. Although I would imagine that we may not see the level of activity that we saw last year at this time. So maybe the labs won't be as busy, but again, entirely up to the labs. But April, May, June, that's sort of the window when we start to see results. And obviously, listen, if we run into something spectacular, we'll have the discussion as how best to make that known.
Okay. Now you talk about thorium. Is there any commercial opportunity to find thorium where you're looking, or do you really just use the uranium thorium ratios as an exploration tool?
Mm-hmm.
It's dominantly used at this point as an exploration tool to help us focus in where we're seeing our uranium spikes. But should the thorium concentration be high enough, there are definitely opportunities to explore that and see where that takes us as well.
Okay. Hatchet Lake, don't want to dwell here. It is another interesting project. It hasn't been worked for several years. What needs to happen in order for you to move forward there, get boots on the ground, even get some drilling done?
Yeah, well, the permitting process is entirely reliant on local community involvement, consultation, and approvals. So once we navigate that, we'll be able to get to work. Now, Having said that, we've just really begun the relationship with the local communities there. We were definitely buoyed by the news that put out by Standard that they signed an exploration agreement, and that's going to help them get on the ground and get to work. That took them about a year, if I read everything correctly. So we're in that process now, and it's not going to happen as quickly as we'd like. But again, our real focus here is East Preston. Maybe we were greedy to think that we could get Hatchet done as quickly as we thought, but we're enthusiastic. We want to get down on the ground there. We like the numbers. We really like it as a project. Valor, our option partner, is more than willing to work with us to facilitate whatever we need to make this thing go. So we're going to be patient and get it done. I mean, look, we've been working East Preston since 2017. So these things do take time, but one of the other questions, and I'm sorry if I'm hijacking you here, David, but I know that people were asking about an LOI that we had signed. That's still alive. The LOI has expired, but the project is available as far as we know. And we're I don't want to say we're shopping, but we're browsing. The best time to browse is when the market's off. And other companies are consolidating their portfolios due to funding issues or financing issues, and projects tend to get cheaper in if the markets aren't cooperating. So we're obviously East Preston is our focus. Hatchet is a focus. If something comes by our desk that we think will benefit the company, the value of the company, and it makes sense, we're going to jump on it. So we're still looking. Everything's still on the table. Nothing is done.
Yeah. Okay. So there is potential for further M&A activity.
Yeah.
You're looking at buying. Would you consider exploring in other uranium jurisdictions, whether in Canada or elsewhere?
Yeah. No. I'll just say no. Hard no. Not at this point. We don't want to get too big before our time and taking on too many. Listen. In bull markets, everyone takes on tons of obligations, and then the markets do what they do. They cycle the other way, and everyone goes, "Oh my God, we got to cut the fat." So we're not really interested in getting too big too quick. We'll see where it goes. But right now, I mean, look, Trevor's in Saskatoon. He knows the basin like his backyard. That's our benefit of working in Saskatchewan, obviously, and the funds that are in the deal.
Okay, and then maybe just last question as we wrap up here. Do you plan to do much with your Peruvian uranium assets at this stage? Are they worth monetizing? Would you sit on them, keep them on the back burner?
No, look, we've been patient with those projects over the last couple of years, kind of looking for buyers, and we had an LOI with a private company, which has since gone public, but there may or may not be some action there. It's really out of sight, out of mind for us. I don't think there's any benefit to really hold on to it. Peru is not Saskatchewan. There's a whole other hornet's nest of issues when you deal with some of these countries, and it may work for some others if it's their sole focus. But to have this as a third or fourth project on our list doesn't make a lot of economic sense. And so you can tell I'm kind of leaning in a certain direction. So we'll see how the next couple of months go.
Great. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up there, guys. So thank you very much for joining me today, Alex and Trevor from Azincourt Energy.
David, thank you. We really appreciate the platform and being able to connect with the multiple investors and interested parties. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, and it's been fun.
Yeah. So thank you everybody else for tuning in. Red Cloud Securities will be back next Tuesday afternoon when I'm going to sit down with Azincourt's partner, Sky Harbor Resources. That's January 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.